Hi, everyone. I'd like to welcome you to our webinar for World Mental Health Day, Empathy and Emotions, Navigating Digital Wellbeing and Grief During COVID-19. I just wanted to go through some housekeeping rules before we begin our session today. So if you have any questions throughout our webinar, please feel free to pose them in the Q&A section of Zoom. Or alternatively in the comments of YouTube, where we're streaming live as well. There will be a recording of the session, so you'll be able to watch it after as well, and please feel free to share with anybody who you think would be interested. So I'm going to give a couple more minutes for people to join us. It looks like we're going to be having a large audience with us today, which is really exciting. And I'm especially pleased to be introducing you to some experts on mental health and digital well-being. So we'll be starting shortly, but I'll give it a couple minutes for everybody to join us. And please feel free to introduce yourself in the chat. We'd love to know where you're joining us from. So just feel free to comment in the chat if you're comfortable. Okay, great. So my name is Bushra Badi, and I'm a social innovator, interdisciplinary researcher, and global strategist committed to advancing peace, justice, equity, and the agency of marginalized individuals and communities around the world. I'm really excited to be joined by our speakers today, and I'll go through and introduce them one by one as I invite them to share their respective stories with us. But before I get started with our session, I wanted to acknowledge the many peoples who are experiencing marginalization and as a result, suffering mental health challenges or experiencing mental health challenges. And a lot of this is rooted in systemic inequities, racism, and injustice. And so to really acknowledge that is important. And to make sure that we're not just applying Band-Aid solutions to really systemic and structural problems that have resulted from oppression, patriarchy, colonization, and other systems of oppression, as I mentioned. So as we gather to share space, opportunities, and partnerships, I'd like everyone to take a moment to reflect on whose land it is that we are occupying and how we got here as both Indigenous and non-Indigenous people, whether it is through creation stories or stories of our ancestors arriving in a space. We're all connected, and the land is a teacher, a life giver, and a healer, and we must always remind ourselves to listen to the land and to work gently no matter where we are. I'm hoping that this will be a collaborative, transformative, and supportive space for people, and that we're able to engage not only as allies, but really disrupt systems that are harming people and contributing to their marginalization. So that includes through policy interventions, politics, community building, and also governance at the local, national, and global levels. I want to give a little bit of a context before we get into the session, and then I'll share a poetry reading to kind of get us started with the storytelling aspect. With COVID-19, we've actually seen an increased experiences of mental health challenges, especially as people are forced apart as a result of social distancing measures, or not being able to be as mobile as they were before, but also its impact on amplifying existing inequities and inequalities within our communities. So communities and individuals who are already marginalized are experiencing even greater marginalization with limited access to resources, opportunities, the disruption of education, and livelihoods. And so I think it's really important for us to acknowledge this, but also really think about the amazing and innovative initiatives that communities are developing in order to support each other. And so that's why I'm really excited to be joined by so many different experts from around the world today. We'll be sharing what they've developed and the work that they're doing and some recommendations that they have that you can apply in your own life and the work that you're doing. And so with that, I wanted to share a poem that I wrote. It's part of a series of poems that I'm writing as part of a book. And this one is called Exhalia. So hope and grief lay next to each other as strange bedfellows. Love is my strangled hold, and there is no love lost between the two, pretending that the other does not exist. Pushing the whole over the edge by disappearing the half, these parts forget, and in forgetting, damn themselves. Tenderness is flitted away like an inconveniencing mosquito. How dare it bring us anything but pleasure? Resting here to find an exalted comfort. Ego spreading as if the sky has a maximum occupancy of one, ignoring the wings that give rise when they are not from an imagined being. Wings decompressing the weight of feeling full alone, the recklessness of suffocating on yourself, pushing down screams of joy, of pain, of excitement, of frustration, feeling that any escape outside will be met with dismay from those who are quick to snatch space by clipping wings, and so suffocates on the very life that is meant to sustain it, holding my breath in anticipation, in consternation, for so long that I blacked out the memory of accepting and releasing, of accepting and releasing, of accepting and releasing. The rhythmic dance I knew that was never acquainted with since I first gasped upon entering into this world. Then taught to hold my tongue and life and sit on display as perfection behind glass walls and screens, the illusion broken by touch. Hope holding on to grief, wrapping the hands of possibility around loss, holding grief together as it cracks under the weight of emptiness, too much to bear alone. Grief holding on to hope, grounding in aloof weightlessness from floating waywardly into an abyss, holding space for hope to rest from its constant propulsion for more someday. Too much to carry alone. Hope and grief finding each other in themselves, after being forced apart by my need for stoicism. Unveiling the glass wall as the still surface of water. The undisturbed veneer I pulled tight to hide the depths of me. I break through the surface to breathe, out and in, out and in, out and in. I can only exist in the in-between, the unbalanced balance, neither underwater or outer space, but nurturing the inner space that houses both grief and hope together, the whole made up of wholes. Strengthened by its vulnerability, letting parts of myself escape so that I may dance and live in my light, To exhale is also an act of welcoming. So I'm really grateful for all of you joining and listening to the poem that I just shared. And with that, I wanted to really get into our storytelling aspect of our session. I think storytelling is a really powerful way to get messages across, and it's also rooted in Indigenous and traditional ways of knowing and sharing knowledge. And I think it's really important to center these communities, and especially Indigenous and traditional knowledges that have historically been targeted and oppressed and limited as a result of cultural genocide and cleansing. And so I think as we look to different ways of acknowledging expertise and understanding what expertise and value is, it's important to decolonize that understanding. And so I think storytelling is an important way to do that and to communicate exactly how we're feeling or what our experiences are. And so with that, I'm going to invite Ian So to share his story. So Ian is a Malaysian medical student studying at St. George's University of London. He leads More Viral Than the Virus, a global COVID youth movement, which supports youth in engaging in conversations, developing creative solutions, and building supportive networks. His work focuses on infodemic management, tackling mental health issues, enhancing access to information, and facilitating partnerships and dialogue between the WHO and young people. So Ian, I invite you to share your story with us now.
Thank you, Bushra, for the wonderful introduction, and esteemed colleagues and audience for listening to my sharing. It's really an honor to be here with you today. At the beginning of the pandemic, Morvirus was founded in response to WHO Director General Dr. Tedros' press statement to young people, warning young people that we are not invincible to the coronavirus, and highlighted that our actions has consequences, especially to the older members of our family. As medical students, we wanted to help out on the front lines, but we were confronted with the unavoidable fact that we were only just medical students. Recognizing the warnings from the WHO as a problem, we were determined to find a solution. We believe that as medical students and young people, we have a social responsibility to educate our peers, other young people, of the key messages of the WHO, address the worrying attitudes of young people, correct any misinformation and disinformation among our different age groups, and tackle issues related to mental health. To take things further, with our earlier infodemic management efforts to bridge the gap between WHO and young people, we had some reflections of our work and realized that we need to evolve into a conversational type of informational flow, going beyond just sharing more information in the form of infographics, or if you can see here on the left-hand side of the screen, coming up with initiatives in the arts like live stream to appeal to other young people about mental awareness. We believe that it's more important to have an act of listening rather than simply sharing more information. Mental health is indeed a challenge and it affects even the best of us. As medical students, we believe that it is something we can definitely work on by engaging on a safe platform and volunteering our time to be there for others, having a friendly chat to speak about anything they would like to talk about. With just 10 minutes of our time, we believe that this can truly impact someone else's life. Introducing the COVID-19 helpline, where we as medical students are not here to diagnose or treat anyone, rather to lend our ear, to listen to others. The calls are recorded, and this is to help keep everyone honest and to help people from abusing the service we provide. The calls we take over Zoom or Skype, and we are supported by doctors from different parts of the world. In some cases, the calls we take the calls for some calls that we take, which might seem a bit out of our comfort zone. With our callers' consent, we can refer them to doctors and mental health workers to take things further. And also, as More Coronavirus, a global COVID youth movement, we have transcended barriers to connect with other like-minded individuals from all around the world, even though we face lockdown and restriction measures. With our COVID-19 helpline, we hope to encourage conversations within different communities and transcend between the barriers of speaking to others about mental health. So I really encourage for everyone to register for your call today or to get involved with us. And please do so with the link I've highlighted, mbttv.co, sign up. And to succinctly summarize what I'm trying to introduce about our helpline, I would share a link in the chat in just a bit. And to end my sharing, recognizing the importance of mental health, our work for mental health must continue beyond World Mental Health Day. Hence, as COVID-19 has affected us all more than ever, for young people, it's imperative for us to call upon other young people from all around the world to initiate conversations among our peers about mental health, inspire creative solutions, and build supportive networks to speak up about mental health.
Thank you so much for sharing, Ian, and for all of the important work that you're doing with your team. Next up, we have Marva Langevin. Marva is the founder of the Guyana Golden Lives Organization, an organization that provides various forms of assistance and support to children and families experiencing loss and grief. through home visits, hampers, camps, workshops, support groups, and scholarships. Marva is an experienced educator and mentor and also works closely with Women's Wednesday Guyana and Covenant House for Children, or Covenant Home for Children, sorry. Marva, I'd like to welcome you to share your story with us. Marva, you're on mute.
Okay, my apologies. Thank you, Bashra, and welcome to everyone who's joining this webinar today. Thank you for joining us. So I would just like to start by singing a song, and it goes, "We are one, we are love, we are how we treat each other when the day is done. We are one, we are love, we are how we treat each other, nothing more." I remember when I first heard this song, I was browsing YouTube after I've just found a cause, an important cause called child bereavement awareness. It was that moment I realized that children do grieve. And this song was included in one of a special camp that was created in the US to help grieving children to express their emotions and to receive the support that they needed. I'm a teacher in Guyana, and this was something new to me. I said, wow, I'm gonna use my voice to spread awareness on child bereavement in Guyana and let people know, hey, children do grieve and we need to support them through this stressful time. Now, before that, 6 years ago, my beloved friend Makisha died from a rare form of cancer called leiomyosarcoma. And she left a little booklet. And here is the booklet. She left a memory book for her 2 sons. And I remember reading it, and there was a page that said, "My wishes for your future." And I will read the first 2 wishes. She said, "That you always know that you are precious, valuable, important, and loved." And the second wish was that you have good health and a full and successful life. As a close friend of Makisha, I said, you know what? I will do whatever I can to fulfill at least one of those wishes for my dear friend Makisha. I stayed in contact with her family, her mother, and the boys. And a few years later, that is when I stumbled upon Child Bereavement Awareness Cause. And I said, you know what? Makisha's boys are going through this. I have some students who are going through this. I have family members who are grieving and their children. And as an adult, I never stopped to pay attention at how grief really affects them. And that is how I began my journey as an advocate for grieving children and creating support services to meet their varying needs. Now, not only are children impacted by a bereavement emotionally and psychologically, they're also impacted socially and physically. And of course, I love to give hugs. I started by giving hugs. I started by creating safe spaces where they can express how they're feeling, and they can also receive the tools to cope with all the intense emotions that they're feeling. But I also realized that a bereavement can cause financial difficulties and other challenges. So with my team, we created a scholarship fund and a welfare fund to ensure that even if it's just groceries or building materials or tuition to go on to a tertiary institution, Guyana Golden Lives will be there for you. And since then, I've been spreading the word, I've been encouraging persons, I've been educating them as well on the impact of grief and loss on children and families and how they can be there to support them. And 6 years later, Guyana Golden Lives is functioning, It's supporting families, and we're also networking with other organizations to have workshops, to have a time of sharing of resources and expertise so that we can have an effective impact on the families that we're working with, especially the children. And I must mention, one of the most amazing things of my journey is when I received the Queen's Young Leader Award for the work I've been doing in this area. And that really introduced me to a larger network where I was supported and I received the resources to continue and to build my services and my cause. So today, with the pandemic and all that is happening, so many of our loved ones are grieving. So many of our loved ones have lost loved ones, and we cannot have the normal rituals that we're accustomed to due to the social distancing measures. But I encourage you to be creative, to reach out to someone, to give them a call. You might not be there, you might not be able to attend the funeral, or you might not be able to be there physically for someone you know that is grieving, but that does not mean that you cannot offer support. You can pick up the phone, you can send a message, and you can just tell them that, you know what, I may not know what to say to you, but I'm here to listen. And trust me, that helps. Active listening and just being and sitting with them during that tough time will be one way in which you can ease the pain and the burden that they're feeling. So thank you so much. Thank you for listening to my story. And I hope that you're encouraged. And I hope that you're now even more aware of the impact of grief and loss on everyone, especially children, and they really need us. Thank you.
Thank you, Marva, for sharing your beautiful story and the amazing work that you're doing to support bereaved children. I'd now like to introduce Christopher Bailey. Christopher leads a program with WHO that looks at the research agenda of the health benefits of the arts, health uses of the arts at the community level, and an engagement with global media and pro-health issues and messaging. His next project is the Healing Arts Auction, a collaboration with Christie's Art Auction House, which aims to raise money for COVID response and the use of the arts for mental health support. So I'll hand it over to Christopher to share his story with us.
Thanks so much, Bushra, and hello, everyone. I hope you're all safe and well and happy. Yes, my name is Christopher Bailey. I'm the Arts and Health Lead at the World Health Organization. And it does kind of beg the question, what do we mean when we say arts can heal? The arts, participating in the arts is not going to kill the virus. What can it do? Well, I think the arts are uniquely designed to help us confront difficult situations, to comfort each other, to contextualize a confusing time, to create community, and to imagine a more positive way forward. These are all things that the arts uniquely can offer each of us individually and through our relationships and our community. I know that the first person that I knew who succumbed to COVID was a very, very old friend of mine. Back when I was young and beautiful, was a actor in New York City. And one of my first stage managers was a guy named David. And since then, whenever I came back to New York to perform, even in my UN context, doing plays that had to do with health or development, he would always be there. And in social networks, he was always sharing what people were doing. He was always a part of it. And when he was hospitalized, and I was inquiring on how he was doing and asking when we could talk, he responded, "He can't talk right now." And I said, well, when can you? He said, "Well, I can't breathe." And then it began to hit home how serious this was. To not be able to speak, I think this gets to the power of the arts. Carl Jung, the Swiss psychologist, once said, "Loneliness is not the absence of people. Loneliness is the inability to express what matters to you most." And I think through the arts, we can do this. One of the more famous and popular events that WHO did during the pandemic was our Together at Home concert with Lady Gaga. And I think that was an example of being able to use, in this case, popular song, to not only get early on the message of hand hygiene and physical distancing and staying at home across to a huge number of people, but through music, creating comfort, creating a sense of solidarity, and creating a shared sense of hope of not only can we get through this, what's going to be different about this? What are we going to improve on? What are we going to learn? And just in my brief time, I'm going to share with you in the next few minutes my own personal journey of how I see the arts as transformative. As you probably noticed, I'm wearing these very strange glasses. This is because I'm virtually blind. I have terminal glaucoma. My optic nerve is hanging by a thread. I have less than 5% vision. This happened just a few years ago. And when I lost my vision, it was a kind of a death, because particularly in our modern day society, 80% of the way that we engage with the world is visual. So when you lose that, you lose the ability to be part of the world. I felt cast out. Ways that I enjoy the world, find beauty in it, suddenly became polluted and beyond my reach and ugly. And like a death, I went through all of the turbulent phases of at times being angry, at times being grief-stricken, at times being in denial. This isn't happening to me. Even bargaining, if I eat something or do an exercise, maybe this will improve. And like death, I came to a point of acceptance through the use of assistive technologies and techniques, being able to accept what was happening to me and dealing with it productively. But more than just acceptance, it got to the point where it became a part of my identity. When I started learning echolocation and began to discover this new way of experiencing the world through sound, it was a world that was different than the sighted world, but in some ways more palpable and had its own strange beauty. So now, when I use my art to take something like this, which I had no control over, rather than just say, oh, poor me, I find my identity in it. I find a meaning. I work towards that meaning, so that just as you, when you close your eyes to savor a glass of red wine, just as you close your eyes to better embody a beautiful piece of music, just as you willingly close your eyes to gently trace the slope of a lover's forearm, so too do I accept the closing of my eyes to better share this moment with you. Thank you.
Thank you, Christopher, for sharing such a deeply personal story, and for allowing us to also understand beauty in a different way. I would now like to invite Jihad bin Musa to share her story with us. Jihad is the founder and CEO of Inspire Corp. Her work centers around the psychological immunization of youth and building psychological resilience by equipping youth with tools and capacities to adapt to change and achieve sustained well-being. Her work on various youth issues is on track to impact 7 million young people in the next year. And she is also a Stanford Men's Fellow and an Atlantic Dialogue emerging leader. of which I am also a member, and that is how I met Jihad actually in December of last year. So the floor is yours, Jihad.
Thank you so much, Pusha, and thank you to everybody who's joined us on this live today, and thank you to all the panelists who are sharing such beautifully moving stories. So my story with mental health and with psychology and how I even became a psychologist started in my own kind of youth and when I was a teenager. And I was struggling with my own mental health. I was struggling with depression. I had moved around a lot. I used to move around to different countries, move to different schools every year. So I was meeting a lot of people, but there was very little sense of home and grounding. But the advantage to that is that I got to know a lot of people whose stories started to feel shared, and my own mental health struggle became echoed in what I was seeing around me. So although I was struggling with depression, I had friends who were struggling with depression or anxiety or eating disorders or self-harm. And I started noticing how this is not the exception. This is one of the most common human experiences that we all share. And this got me really curious as to why it was being treated as something that only a certain percentage of society experiences, as if it's the outlier and not the rule. And that search is what led me to psychology, and anything that I was studying. We do learn in a very kind of westernized way, especially the way that I grew up. So I was always comparing and contrasting it with what I was seeing on the ground in Morocco, in Turkey, in the United Arab Emirates, across the Middle East. And I was starting to see that there was this really big difference in how we talk about mental health. So traditionally, mental health is seen as something that a person experiences quite rarely. If you go through a mental health struggle or disorder, you need to go see a professional and a psychologist. And that's the only option that you have. I didn't have that option when I was a teenager, and almost everybody around me didn't have that option either. We were all struggling with different forms of mental health issues, but nobody was talking about what to do about it, and there weren't enough psychologists in our milieu to be able to even reach out for help. So that got me wondering, okay, there has to be another way. Like if we don't have enough psychologists, because in developing countries, we have one psychologist for every 200,000 people. So it's unrealistic to think that one psychologist can handle that many people. That is, if they can afford it, if they can overcome this social stigma in order to reach out for help. So there are a lot of barriers. So that got me to start experimenting with ways for me to help while I was still a student. And that was specifically because of the Syrian war. A lot of my friends were from a lot of war-torn countries, and it was part of my upbringing and my childhood to see how these experiences of grief were being replicated across many different communities. And so having a little bit of knowledge compelled me to try and do something with it. So that's when I got into play therapy, and I started my first program in Istanbul that used play therapy to help kids go kind of overcome what they were experiencing. And it worked, and that kind of got me hooked to creating new tools and new programs. And I started using play to do that. So now each time that I come across a new issue, I try to think of how can these young people be empowered with the knowledge and the tools that they need to respond to the adversity they're facing. And if all of us are going to experience a mental health struggle at some point in our lives, then we all have the right to have the emotional education and the knowledge and the tools to be able to overcome that using social support. And that's where the arts play a big role. There's a lot that we can learn about our mind and ourselves and how we can navigate our mental health struggles through learning to express what we're feeling through writing or creating pieces of art. We can get clear on what our own well-being looks like through the arts. We can also build our resilience and our communities of support by engaging in personal interests and activities. And so my mission is to kind of blend the two and to be able to give access to really kind of complex knowledge within psychology that usually traditionally was only preserved for psychologists to have, but to make it super accessible by blending it with the arts. So as an example, I use the Hogwarts castle from Harry Potter as a space that symbolizes different areas of the self, so you can learn to deeply analyze yourself by navigating each space and kind of visually going to each space and analyzing it, and then being able to zoom back out and kind of see yourself as a whole. So that's my mission. I want every single person to have their own resilience, for it to be strong, for them to have emotional skills, for them to be autonomous and seeking support, so that when we all experience mental health struggle, we can turn to each other and not feel that we have nowhere to turn to because there might not be a psychologist that we can turn to.
Thank you for sharing your journey with us, Jihad, and for the inspiring work that you're doing. Next, I would like to introduce Charles-Antoine Barbeau-Meunier, who is an MD, PhD student at Université de Sherbrooke, and is an active scholar on empathy. He has modeled empathy in various social, cultural, and institutional settings, including healthcare, climate change, and the COVID-19 pandemic. He is also the founder and president of Bien-être Numérique, an organization which provides guidance for youth on mental health, social media, and digital technology. So I'd like to welcome Charles-Antoine to share his story with us.
Thank you so much, Bushra, for the introduction. Thanks everyone for the wonderful stories so far, the difference you're making in your communities, and actually the planet as a very large community. And thanks everyone attending today. So I'm going to share a story that's not preceding my current engagement, but a story that is through this engagement, what we learned through Bien-être Numérique, which is the French for digital well-being. So first, what is digital well-being? Just for the cause, we define digital well-being as a conscientious and intentional use of digital tech that will maximize well-being, because there's obviously connectedness, belonging. There's how we sculpt our identity through digital interactions and networks. But digital well-being is also about minimizing potential negative impacts. So whether it's with the brain and executive functions like attention, impulse control, and it's about minimizing impacts on our physical, mental, and social health. And obviously, as you all know, digital tech are an incredibly social environment, just with social media. So we set up Bien-être Numérique as a project by youth, for youth, and we have students on board and young professionals from all areas. So it's medicine, public health, it's education, communication, mental health intervention. It's also marketing, and we set up this initiative to provide workshops for high schools, for teenagers. But as we designed and the whole project and built an expertise, people started approaching us for guidance from all corners, all trades. I think digital well-being is really a issue for the whole of society. So we've provided advice for school boards, community workers, police officers, also community police, groups representing elderly population, mental health groups, even healthcare. So currently with the pandemic, it's a little bit of a rising tide. And for digital tech, it rose screen time for people everywhere. And so many people are asking for guidance in this situation with as we go through an accelerated digital shift. So the message I want to share, the story I want to share, has to do with what I think is really maybe the biggest obstacle for digital well-being today. That's a problem with empathy and dialogue. So it started, I think I realized as soon as we set up that workshop in our very early days, we had a call from a high school. And so it's the principal asking us to give a talk and some guidance for the teachers, because they're actually having quite a bit of arguments about the place digital tech should take up in school and in classes, in classrooms. And a lot of the positions are always, black or white. There's a lot of sensationalistic portrayals when it comes to digital tech. So it was a bit of a contentious issue in that school. And so when we provided a talk and we had a dialogue and a conversation around what people's understanding and concerns are, we ended up with the one perspective that was maybe the most productive, the most consensual, was, well, why not just ask the students, and why not just include them for a common agreement in the classroom how this should be handled? Because everybody wants success, and also they want well-being with digital tech. So it's better to maybe include them in the conversation, and this is how people started moving forward with that. And this is sometimes what I found is lacking with that issue, is this dialogue. The same occurred when we gave talks to a university for the elderly, and we ended up just exploring for a while. We completely sidetracked and ended up discussing what memes are, what they even mean, what they signify. And they were incredibly curious about digital culture. It's just maybe there was a lack of an opportunity to explore that in maybe a safe setting where we can have a dialogue what this is. And I say safe setting because there's a lot of judgments around tech use. So we have these judgments that people of an older generation don't know how that works, and they're a bit powerless with how this is developing quickly nowadays. And there's also these pre-notions that youth, the way that they use TikTok or Instagram, that they're the digital natives, that there's a lot of negative stuff, and that the generation is just getting ruined by these behaviors. So we need to open up a space where this dialogue can occur, and this is a lot of what we've been doing. And we realize the importance of that when, say, I remember in one workshop, there's a student who kept raising her hand and bringing up very important points about mental health and social media. And at the end of that class, the teacher comes to us and is like, well, this is just amazing. I've not heard the voice of that student since we began the school year. And that was 8 months ago. And for 8 months, that student had not raised her hand to speak. And now that we had a conversation on digital well-being, she was participating quite a bit. And it turns out that student suffering silently, in a sense, and was afraid maybe to open up with these issues because of fear of judgment, of that we think it doesn't matter what issues we have on social media or other platforms. And a lot of the questions we get when we provide the workshop is also the services you're talking about. We share hotlines where people can call at any time. They're asking if it's going to be confidential, because I think a lot of people are, I want to wrap up for sake of time, but a lot of people are worried that that they're going to be judged again. So they want to make sure it's confidential. So maybe if we really open up a space for dialogue around this, it's going to make a huge difference, especially as we move towards more and more online classes with the pandemic. There's a lot of issues of cyberbullying, which I won't get into now for the sake of time, but it demands some attention for all generations currently. So thanks a lot for hearing me out.
Thank you so much, Charles Antoine, for your great work on digital well-being and supporting youth and supporting people across generations. Next up, we have Dr. Ken Carson, who is WHO's technical officer with the Department of Mental Health and Substance Use. He is the innovation and digital focal point for the department and has been involved in the development of a number of WHO scalable psychological interventions, including self-help interventions that use technology or online delivery. He has a strong interest in usability and human-centered design approaches and the application of these approaches in the design of mental health tools specifically. Welcome, Dr. Ken Carson.
Hi, thanks, Bushra. And hello, everybody, and thanks to fellow panelists for amazing and inspiring stories, and thanks to everybody who's joined us today. So before I get into my own sort of personal story that I'll share, I was just wanting to reflect very briefly on some of the things that we've also heard from everybody. And one theme that came through very much for me was that all the stories talked about what we can all do. So obviously, when we think about mental health, we might be thinking about professionals, we might be thinking about, how we can go and see different people. But we heard words like community, supporting each other. We had examples of how we can just offer kind words when people are grieving. All of these very, what we might say is simple aspects, but hugely, hugely important. And we heard about the importance of resilience, non-specialists, of the arts. We're thinking very much about community-based approaches, about how these aspects can really support and improve our mental health. And that's one thing that came across with the stories for me. And it also connects a bit to the story that I'll tell now, which is a bit about my own journey into where I am now and mental health in general. So I'm a clinical psychologist by training, and I'd say that as a clinical psychologist, we spend most of our time listening to stories as opposed to telling them. So I'm also probably not the best storyteller, but I'm going to give it a try anyway. But one thing I learned, I trained in the UK, and one thing I learned quite early on in my training was the importance of things like social support, the importance of community, the importance of structural determinants of health, all of these aspects that we talk about, and also how the responses from professionals are very important, and seeking help is very important when people need it, but also just that we can all provide some aspects of support and help. And my journey through clinical psychology took me through London, where I worked with refugee communities mainly, before then doing some work in various countries, and then somehow finding my way to WHO through a few, I suppose, accidental encounters and exchanges. And I found myself at WHO, where I took on a consultancy to start working with the mental health department to develop what we call self-help approaches. And primarily, these approaches are things like self-help apps or self-help books and guides that you can read. So we have like an illustrated book that we've released that helps people to manage stress, which I can mention a bit more later on. And one of the core aspects of these self-help approaches is, again, this focus on very simple skills, things like breathing, things like mindfulness, grounding, but also social support, connecting with people, all of these aspects. And I suppose in my work, one of the things that keeps me going and inspires me has been the stories and the teachings that I've had from various clients that I've worked with over the years, and the various feedback we get when we do this work. So what we're doing now is we've been developing these different interventions and then testing them in big research trials, with the hope of then being able to then release them once we find out they work, to hopefully then have other people take them on, implement them and use them quite widely. And just to give you a bit of a sense of the power of, I think, these community approaches and these self-help approaches, this is a quote that I'm going to read from a project that we have in Uganda, which uses intervention that is a big group, self-help group. So about 30 people come together, they've learned these different techniques of dealing with stress and they use them individually. But again, there's quite a big focus there on supporting others. So the quote was, "This program helped me because before it started, I had too much stress. I'm alone with my children. Despite what I'm going through, no one can provide me a helping hand. Most of my relatives died during the war. Nobody cares about me. This program helped me reduce my stress, and my mind is free because I picked up on the most important piece of advice that they gave me. They said to change what you can change and leave what you cannot change. I have left all those bad things I used to think about. And that was a quote from a participant who took part in the group. And I found it very powerful because it reminds me of the importance of the types of approaches that we're maybe talking about here today and that we've had mentioned, the telephone helplines, the community support, the support from non-specialists. So I'm very grateful to be part of this seminar today and this webinar, and to be able to share my own work, but also to hear the great work of others, which I think chimes very much with the work that we're trying to do at WHO. So thank you all for your time.
Thank you so much, Dr. Carswell. I think reflecting on the stories that everyone has shared so far, I agree that there's that common thread of community and really centering things using an empathetic approach. And so how do we foster greater empathy within our communities? And then I think a more systems level, what are the interventions that we're really pushing for so that people aren't forced into resiliency? I think it's something to definitely, celebrate when people are able to address mental health challenges. But I think it's also a question that we need to ask about why systems are the way that they are, and that they do marginalize people and they do contribute to people's harm. And that there's specific populations that experience that in larger proportions than others. And so that's a question that I would have for our speakers is, when you're doing the work at the community level, how do you balance that with more systems level approaches or systemic interventions to ensure that people are really being supported in ways that center their agency and don't perpetuate kind of these notions of saviorism in the work that you do? And I'll just let anybody maybe unmute their mics, and we'll kind of go from there. A couple minutes to intervene on this question.
Okay, sure. I can break the ice. So as I mentioned earlier, my take is going to be with our project, Digital Wellbeing. So what happens is, right, this is a whole of society kind of issue, right? And so the government of Quebec has been interested in how screen time, youth, and mental health have to be explored as an issue. But as is often the case, a lot of the people invited at the table are going to be researchers and experts, but then there's no youth that was going to be present. And so we went there to provide maybe a presentation, some guidance on what we learned from working with youth and as youth as well, so that we can implement structural changes, and also a culture. It's also a cultural thing we need to change when it comes to these higher levels. So there is a lot of openness with these issues. I think there's never been so much openness when it comes to mental health. And as for the digital environment that we're all in right now, as we have this meeting, but also with the pandemic, as I said, is accelerating. I think it's just a necessity. And everyone by design, by default, are going to be open to this. But at the structural level, sometimes they just don't have those initiatives or those resources. They don't necessarily know how to tackle that. So please go ahead, go approach them. They're very open from my experience here, at least. And that can make a lasting difference for sure.
Thank you, Antoine. Jihad?
Yeah, so at Inspire Corp, what we do is that we work with the people who are around youth and who support youth. So we always work at the community level. So for example, when we work with vulnerable youth in Northern Morocco, we work with the community organizations. So these are the smaller organizations that are in vulnerable neighborhoods. And what we do is we always take the approach of, instead of trying to come in and teach or give information. Instead, it's first us learning and collaborating together to share what we could share from a position of knowledge within psychology of like how we would analyze what we're seeing. So we always use a resilience lens and approach, which is aimed at giving agency not only to the young people that we're trying to support, but also to the teachers and social workers and volunteers who are working with young people. So the way that we do that is really centered around not classifying certain information as, you know, the information that the expert has and then the information that perhaps like a young person should have and a teacher should have. So so we try as much as possible to make it egalitarian by simplifying it and making it easy to use in practice. So when we talk about resilience, there's a lot of, you know, resilience research and a lot to unpack there. So we have a resilience formula. And that formula has all these complex elements in terms of analyzing the interaction between risk factors and stressors and the protective factors and the specificity of it within the ecology that the individual is in, how that interacts with the opportunities of support that that person has available to them and accessible, and the difference between available and accessible, and then how that is modulated by the systems of meaning that the person has. So while this seems like a lot to unpack and a lot to analyze, when we put it in a formula, it becomes a lot easier to take any situation and have the staff member or social worker try to unpack these elements. So instead of saying, well, you know, how can we make sure that this person who is struggling with a family issue is having the right form of family support that they need, we can start looking at, for example, wait, what does family mean to this person? You know, and that starts to unpack some really interesting things. Like recently we had found that for some of the vulnerable kids we were working with, family didn't have the meaning that we thought, which is, you know, support and a warm environment. Instead, it was transactional. So then you have to approach it from that understanding and that meaning that that person has. So it's highly personal. And the whole point is to empower the person we're trying to support in doing that analysis by themselves or within that community, by making the information that we would use in doing that very same analysis more accessible.
Thank you, Jihad. I guess with that, maybe I'll go to our next question. And I think this one really focuses on grief in particular. So something that's been of concern to me is I feel like we have a mental health crisis looming, especially with the increased experiences of grief and loss during this pandemic. And so I wanted to kind of get a sense from whomever wants to intervene on how you're addressing the stigma around grief, and then also in a context where people may not necessarily be able to come together physically, support individuals who are experiencing that grief and loss.
Thank you, Bashra. So especially in Guyana and the Caribbean, grief, death, and loss are still taboo topics. And I remember, especially when I first started this work, many people were running away from me. They're like, I don't want to hear it. I don't want to hear it. Because I think there is this sense of belief that if you talk about it, you're going to bring it at your doorstep. But the fact is that we all experience grief. We will all die at some point. So these are our realities. So I started to create spaces where I facilitated a conversation to result in people not feeling uncomfortable about the topic. And also using the stories of the families that I work with to let them know that this is the reality, or this is the experience of various people. And I found that it softened many hearts, and it really opened their eyes and made them aware and said, oh, wow, I never thought about it like this. But now with the pandemic, it is like people who are working in grief support, is like we're having to take a few steps backwards and then having to create a whole new space where we are effective in providing grief support. But what many of the bereavement care professionals and counselors and advocates are saying, we're trying to remind people that they need to be gentle with themselves. You know, that's the first thing, to let people know that they need to be gentle with themselves, and to also educate them on the various grief responses that they should expect, and to not be alarmed by it. Because I realize that, especially with children, now that adults are more aware that they grieve, when they see certain grief responses, they get worried and they think something is wrong with them. So that is where, especially Guyana Golden Lives organization, we come in and we give them the facts and just prepare them for what is to come. And then also give them tips and information on how they can be here to support the child. And what I've seen and what I've read on various blog posts and websites is that apart from reminding people or letting them know that they need to be kind to themselves, what they also need to do is to grief is personal. So we can have all the tips and advice, but you can also play a role in helping, in coping with all of the emotions that you're feeling. So we're encouraging people to, sit as family, even if it's just individually, sit and think about how you can honor the memory of the person who would have died. You may have to create new rituals because, as I said, you can't visit the funeral home and you can't really be there and have that time of coming together as a family. But sit and think, what will help you? Because it's such a personal experience. Think of what you believe will help you to cope. And when those emotions really get overwhelming, what can you do to, not let it consume every part of you, and where you can just move through the task of mourning and find ways where you can prevent or decrease the likelihood of you developing a mental illness. Because the research has shown that it depends on the type of death and the impact and the social support that is set in place. If it is positive and if it is supportive, it reduces that likelihood of that person developing depression, PTSD, anxiety, and other mental illnesses. So from my organization, we create programs, and when we do awareness, it's more of a preventative mental health strategy than intervention strategy. And if there's need for intervention as well, we will we will make a referral to those agencies or organizations that can provide that clinical and professional support.
Thank you, Marva. Yeah, go ahead, Dr. Carswell.
Yeah, I'll just quickly answer that just about the issue of grief. I think I'll just very much support what Marva was saying about normalizing, talking about it, letting people know that grief can be incredibly difficult and seem strange. And I know many times throughout my own life, I've had people asking if, is this normal? Why am I feeling like this? And it's I think that talking is, not only does it reduce the stigma around grief, but around many of the issues that we're talking today. I think it's about having a conversation around it and mentioning these things. When it comes to COVID-19 and the restrictions around meeting and therefore, grief rituals and things, I wonder, I guess it's about trying as best you can to continue to support, to continue to be in touch, to continue to try and find ways to have those rituals or those goodbyes as best we can, given the situation that we have. And I know that there's been some incredible examples of that, both during this pandemic and also during the Ebola in West Africa. There was some really good work done around how people can modify some of the funerals and grieving rites to support people.
Thank you, Dr. Carswell. Ian, go ahead.
Thank you, Dr. Carswell. Actually, we noticed different initiatives by youth around the world. And one thing that stood out recently, I think in May, this Yellow Hearts for COVID, this initiative based in the UK. So they created a Facebook group where they were basically sharing about grief, and people were sharing about the loved ones they lost, and reminding us all that your loved one is not more than just a statistic, and that people were really coming up and sharing and reminding one another about the loved one that had passed on, and sharing about the remarkable stories that each one of us share and we hold. So I truly agree with what Dr. Carswell mentioned about speaking about it and initiating conversations surrounding it. And I think there are plenty of groups on Facebook or within your family that you can address this together.
Thank you, Ian. Christopher, did you have something you wanted to add? You're on mute.
I think in addition to what everyone else has said, which I found very helpful, there are other forms of grief beyond the passing of a friend or a loved one. I think young people today in particular are experiencing some feelings of grief for their interrupted dreams and anxiety about the future. And I think particularly for those people where it's not necessarily a specific event like the passing of a friend, but a more generalized or ambiguous feeling of sadness or anxiety, it's harder to express. It's harder for people to admit that they're feeling it, and it becomes tricky. And because everyone's story is so different and their contexts are so different, it becomes a challenge to offer advice to the most number of people. But I think there is one common theme that's emerging from this conversation, and certainly is in keeping with a lot of what WHO advises, and that's, when in doubt, just listen. Just if there's somebody out there that you haven't heard from in a while, particularly someone who may be living alone or is isolated, or an older person or a younger person who may find themselves outside of their normal social network and in lockdown, reach out to them, check in with them, and let them talk about whatever it is that's most important to them. And I think that goes a long way, and perhaps finding ways of online or otherwise sharing an activity, finding ways of watching movies together when you share a video, or to play instruments together virtually, and to remain active, to be physically active. I think that kind of communication that is more normal, but active and sincere, and where your attention is on to the other person and deeply listening and feeling what that other person is going through, has in and of itself a healing ability, I think.
Thank you for sharing. And I definitely agree. I think there's not one size fits all like models of how people experience grief and what interventions will work for them, and how people want to be engaged with either. What is the things that people, or what are the things that people value within relationships, and how they want to be like treated will vary from person to person. And so I think that's really important about listening deeply and actively, and really understanding the people that we're engaging with on a very human level. And then that kind of leads me to the next question that I have, which focuses on technology in particular. We've seen technology kind of presented as a solution to a lot of challenges, and people have also problematized that as techno-solutionism. So really understanding the role that technology plays when it comes to mental health support is critical, and understanding its limitations. So my question for you is, what role do you think technology is playing in either supporting or maybe even contributing to harm towards youth, or even intergenerationally? And included in that, I would say, incorporating some of the experiences of gender-based violence, for example. We've seen that in the Q&A section of our conversation. The experiences of differently abled and disabled persons when it comes to technology. So if you can speak to some of that, I think that our audience would really like to hear what role that technology is playing and what role it should play maybe.
Sure. Can I bring back our old friend Marshall McLuhan, who said that media are extensions of ourselves. So we have to think carefully what media are offering to us as extensions of ourselves. You have to think carefully how it's redesigning the way we enter into social relationships and our relationship with ourselves. There's incredible opportunities, and I'm always amazed at apps that are designed in a way that just being there with you, they're catching bits of your tone of voice, they're catching bits of your interactions, and they're able to call whether you're developing depression, whether you're even developing dementia for, at a certain point. There's apps that are going to be very sensitive to us, and they can help us realize how we're evolving and doing, and when we face a mental illness. But at the same time, these platforms are designed with some interest to maximize our screen time. They're designed to harness data and sell it as well. We have to regulate that space. That is an obvious thing we need to do. So that if you're familiar with the idea of commercial determinants of health, well, that is one right there. If you think that the CEO of Netflix once said, right, that their main competitor is sleep, then you're thinking about a conflict with these techs and our well-being. So there's vast opportunity, but we just have to be really careful how we're extending ourselves on these platforms.
Thank you, Charles Antoine. Go ahead, Ken.
Yeah, thank you. So technology, I think it can. I would agree with everything that Charles just said. That it's there's a lot of aspects of technology that may be doing harm. But in terms of how we can harness it, I think that there's a lot of evidence for the benefits of self-help apps and technologies like this, guided self-help. What I find very interesting about this area of work, though, is if we look at the research, we see that guided self-help. So when you might use an app, but you also have a brief telephone call with somebody once a week to motivate you, those aspects are much more powerful than just using an app on its own, where people tend to drop off, they might not use it so much and things like this. So even with the use of technology, we're still seeing the importance of the human aspect. And certainly this is something we're working on at WHO, and we'll hopefully release things in the future, because we see we can reach a massive scale through technology, through apps, through guided self-help that we can't reach maybe with face-to-face work, even with non-specialists. So it fills a role, but that has to be a role within a much wider community-based approach, an approach that's looking at structural determinants, and also within a health system that also provides the support that people might need face-to-face. So because sometimes there's a wish that we can solve everything with technology and do everything through apps. And I think the human aspect will always play a role, but the technology part can play a role also. So thank you. And I'd just like to apologize if I've looked a bit distracted, because I've been answering some of the questions on the chat. So that's why.
Not a problem. And thanks for answering those questions. I'm sure our audience really appreciates that. Does anybody else want to jump in to answer this question? I did have one more that I kind of wanted to close off with, but if we have any other responses in terms of the role of technology, please let me know. If not, then we'll, oh, Chris, you're on mute.
Yeah, I think technology is a wonderful tool in this situation, both in terms of the scale, which my colleague just talked about, but also on an individual basis. My mother is in her 80s and living alone and hadn't been in contact with anybody for weeks. So being able to set up my iPad at dinner and literally being able to share a meal with an isolated person is something that would be far harder to do without the technology. So it is a blessing in that sense. But I also would like to underline the things that technology won't ever do. And that's the power of being in the presence of someone else. And when we talk about, for instance, the healing power of art, it's easy to talk about, well, through digital connection, we can share, and that's important, and we can get the information out there that might have a healing effect. But we also know that in a live performance, certain things happen, like heartbeats literally begin to synchronize. T-cell counts go up. There is a connection. The mirror neurons between the performers and the audience begin to echo joyously in a way that is not possible in digital entertainment. And furthermore, with the economic effects of COVID, we've seen it's hit like a comet to live performance all over the world, with dark theaters, dark concert halls, and groups going out of business all around the world. And when you think about how artists are the first to respond to disasters of all sorts because of their innate sense of compassion, I think paying attention to preserving in-person performance is something that is more than just a nostalgic thing of yes, it would be nice to do that. It's a necessity that we don't want to become so disconnected because we think that this digital means of communication is a replacement for actual connection. There's a reason why we have the word "I'm touched." It's more than just an intellectual understanding of what someone is going through. It's a biophysical connection to another person, that my body is next to yours. I can hear the vibration of your sound. I can feel your warmth. And so I'm hoping that when we emerge from this pandemic, yes, let's take advantage of all the wonderful things we've learned about the technology, but I hope that doesn't strike the death knell for in-person true communication.
Yeah,
I agree.
Go ahead, Marva.
Yeah, I believe it's everything in moderation. You know, technology is amazing. It's allowed us to connect with people from across the world, something that was not possible a few hundred years ago. And it also gives us the ability to see if someone needs support, especially in grief work. I am not on Twitter and some other social media spaces, but I spend a lot of time on Facebook. And what I've seen recently is more people are sharing their stories, sharing their grief journey. And then from that, it gives out their friends and their family members the opportunity to reach out and also to know when it's needed, when extra support is needed. So just being able, so it's given a lot of people a voice who may not have had it before. So in our physical spaces, sometimes we would have to wait till we meet up for a chat and we hear what's going on. But with social media, it gives people the opportunity to share how they're feeling, their thoughts. I mean, some people do abuse it. And then we have cyberbullying, and then we have these pages that just spread hate and all those things. But the positive side is that people have a space where they can share with a wider audience of how they're feeling. And then that audience has the opportunity to respond to them. So just a simple thing as leaving a comment, I know on Facebook, they have the care emoji. I love to hug. So now that I cannot physically hug someone, I'm excited that I could give them a hug on Facebook during that care emoji. And it's just using everything in moderation. Of course, physical connection is very important, but I'm also grateful and thankful for these digital spaces where people can connect. We can connect right now and we can reach a wider audience, people who are on here listening. But then also, we need to always remember that when we log off of this, we still have people we're living with, we still have humans in our communities that we can still also make an effort to be there with them in a physical space. So everything in moderation.
Just a quick one to add on to what Marva said. It reminds me actually about the COVID-19 pandemic and all the different helplines for mental health being really busy, and also how technology actually really brings us together. And in the past, if you were to compare COVID-19 to the war in the past, medical students were, have to learn as you go and engage and help to treat people in the times of war. But now with technology, we are able to, as medical students, we're able to engage through for instance, the COVID-19 helpline, through an online platform. And I think this is the amazing bit about technology, allowing us young people to really engage with other young people and other individuals who need a friendly chat. And it's just amazing, like what Marva was describing, and I truly relate to her. And also earlier on in the beginning, the comics about saying how are you to your grandparents. I think making the effort, although we can't really see them, I think it's always good to remind us all that even though working from home, we should use technology to make every effort to connect with one another. Thank you.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. And I'd like to echo the importance of really fostering and valuing relationships. I think maybe during this time, that's made us more mindful of how precious and valuable those moments are that we share with each other. And I'm also grateful that I've been able to share this space with all of you. And kind of to wrap up our session, I wanted to really invite everybody to engage in an activity, which is called What's in Your Wellbeing Package. So as we look to really supporting ourselves and finding ways to build up both resilience, but also just support our mental health and well-being and make that a priority. I wanted to get a sense of what each of you would, like to be in your well-being package, or something that you kind of go to when you do need support. So I will start off with, let's say, Jihad to go first.
Sure. All right. So I have several items, and the first of which is something that I did last year, and I have on my wall in front of me at all times, which is to create a well-being vision board and to clearly define what well-being means to me. Because I find that it's super easy when I get overwhelmed with strong emotions to go to the automatic, picking up your phone to scroll or watching TV to relax. So I created these different reminders of what well-being looks like to me. So it's, creating thoughtful food, having deep conversations, going ice skating, celebrating changing seasons. So I have a bunch of these on my wall in front of me to always remind me to go to these activities to kind of refill my emotional energy instead of picking up my phone or TV remote. The second thing are a series of letters based on different emotions. So when you feel happy, like to read it when I'm feeling that way. When you feel down, when you feel lonely, and when you feel sad. The next thing is chai tea. I always drink chai tea to feel better and very cozy and to kind of feel that kind of sense of warmth. And to go with that would be a blanket that was gifted to me by a friend. So it serves also to create that sense of warmth and support, but it also reminds me of my friends and reminds me to reach out for support. And then the final thing is to express myself through the arts. So I have a bunch of different materials that I can use to collage or to journal. And that reminds me to just let out what I'm feeling and express it rather than holding it in. And that's it.
Thanks for sharing, Jihad. Do you want to nominate somebody to go after you?
Yeah, sure. Christopher.
There, I remembered to unmute myself. I think one of the things that has been important for me and I would recommend to others is to think about activities that are physically active. There's a tendency in our society, especially with the technology, to spend our days watching, to spend our days listening to the radio. But one of the things that's wonderful about not just listening or watching performance is to do the performance. And in our household, reverse this, my home is filled with musical instruments. And so whenever anyone feels the urge, literally, we can express ourselves not only with music individually, but together through singing, through playing. And if you dance, you should dance. If you like sports, you should do sports all with the safety measures in place, certainly. But I guess that's the thing. Let's deal with this pandemic not passively as observers, but let's grapple with it. Let's wrestle with it, and let's be both physically, mentally, and spiritually active.
Thank you, Christopher. And do you want to nominate the next person to go?
Oh, let's see. Let me look at the names here. I would like to hear from Marva.
Thank you, Christopher. So everyone, because my main focus is on bereavement and grief as a result of a death loss, I've created a little grief care package here. And I know sometimes many families and friends, they might be at a loss on how they can provide support, beyond my condolences. People usually say my condolences or have my sympathies, or I'm sorry for your loss. But what else can you do to show that you are there for that family or that individual? So I created my grief care package. Like if I was adjusting to bereavement or if I was grieving, this is something that I would have liked for someone to give to me with the things that I enjoy. So I have here a blue butterfly. So a butterfly is a symbol of hope. And November actually is Children's Grief Awareness Month, and they use the blue butterfly to spread hope and to spread awareness on grief in childhood. So the blue butterfly is something that I like, and it always reminds me to keep hope alive. And then personally, I love pistachio nuts. So if I know my friends, if I'm sad or if I'm going through a stressful time, they can always give me pistachios and it will make me feel better. And something for energy, I love to work out as well. Granola bars. I've been obsessed with granola bars since I was 13. And so I added 2 granola bars into my wellness package. And this is something that will give me energy. And then I have a journal. So it's almost filled. This is my personal journal, but it's Grace, a coloring journal. So it has pages where I can write and express how I'm feeling. And there are also pages where it has various art drawings where I can color in and it makes me feel better. Coloring, writing, journaling, it is one form of expressing how you feel. And then I have 2 more things. So I have these little cards. So from my organization, especially the fact that we can't hug people during this time, I created these little cards with our logo. And then inside, there's a stamp that says, "This hug is for you." So I know for me, if someone gives me this, I will be happy because I love hugs. And this is also an idea that you can use. You can have a stamp or you can write in a little card, "This hug is for you," to show that you're there to support. And finally, I found this really great grief guide by Mickey Spear. So she created this guide to help you to write down how you're feeling, and she has various topics that and various activities that you can complete to help you cope with the death of your loved one. And I think it's called A Healing Reflection for Grieving Souls. My Heart Still Remembers. So you can check for it online. It's Mickey Spear. You can check her out at www.mickeySpear.com, and you can see all the grief resources that she has as well. So this completes my little wellness package. It's something that I know that will help me to cope and just give you some ideas on what you can put together for a friend or a family member or a child that you know that is grieving.
Thank you so much, Marva. And do you want to nominate the next person to go? Marva? I don't know if she can still hear me, but I will nominate, I guess, Ian to go after. Ian, do you want to share what your package looks like?
Thank you, Bushra. Well, to me, other than just being a medical student, just like what Christopher said, music is actually quite a big part of my life. So at times I will go to the garden to de-stress with music, and I just love the company of people to share the music with. And also at times, if I really need more sugar, I think chocolates are also my next go-to, and also some tea. But I don't have tea bags right now with me, but that's really, really good sharing with everyone. Thank you. I would now pass it on to Kenneth, Dr. Carswell, sorry.
Oh, great, thank you, Ian. Okay, so this might seem like an advert for the work I've been talking about, but it's actually not. But this is what I would have in my wellness package, which is our Doing What Matters in Times of Stress, an illustrated guide. Unfortunately, I haven't got a printed version. Why I would have this in my wellbeing package is I've been working on I didn't write it. Somebody called Russ Harris, a very talented individual, did write it. But I've been working on this for a long time, and I've read it so many times I can probably memorize it and narrate it all back. And what I must say is that the ideas in here really, with reading and rereading, they're very simple ideas, and they do get under your skin and they get in your memory. And I find myself using some of these ideas very much just during my everyday life. So ideas around living by your values, identifying what your values are, and just making sure that you're mindful of these. So that would be one thing in my package. I think the other thing would be a gratitude journal. It's something I don't use probably enough for myself, but it's something that I do find incredibly helpful when I do use it. And the other thing is being connected. That means both connecting with people through telephones and everything, but also just feeling connected to part of a global community, a movement of people who are trying to change things. That's something that gives me hope and strength, I think. So they would be my main things in my wellbeing package. And do we now pass over to Charles? I don't think we've heard from you yet.
Sure.
Is that right? Yeah.
So my care package, I think it's actually being grounded in the present moment. Anything that helps me create a sense of here and now is really helpful. So say I've had a little candle the whole time we had this presentation, and lo and behold, Bushra, Jan, I've heard you, and I have my tea. It's always there. And now everyone pay close attention. Isn't that a satisfying sound? And arguably I shouldn't be doing this over my laptop, but and the last thing probably, and I know Bushra will be keen with this, is poetry, right? Also helps us be grounded. So what I've had recently is Devotions by Mary Oliver. If anyone knows of her writings, always with nature, the now, and the ethereal and the ephemeral of life. Absolutely recommend being grounded with these beautiful things that are a flame, tea, and some nice poetry.
Thank you for sharing that. And I guess now it's my turn. So yes, I'll definitely echo the poetry part, but I actually write poetry. And so this contains the poetry that I've been writing over the last 3 years. I'm hoping to share that with the world. Eventually, actually, the first one that I've publicly shared was actually the one that I read at the beginning of the session. So I'm really excited about being able to share and express my emotions and understand my identity and existence in that way. And then kind of keeping on brand with the tea. I really love tea. And this one in particular is called Euphoria, not to promote this particular brand. Like you can use another brand of tea if you'd like, or just make your own kind of blend. But I thought it was especially interesting that this one was called Euphoria. And then last but not least, and don't worry, it doesn't have soup in it, but soup is definitely part of my care package. It's very on brand for me. And this like bowl in particular, it has like a beehive pattern on it, which is also something that I really like. It's kind of fits into kind of this notion that people have of me of being a busy bee. So yeah, those are kind of the things that I would have in my package. And then also dance. So being able to physically move and express myself in that way. And it's also rooted in my culture as well. So learning Afghan cultural dance from a young age was really important to me to be able to connect, and then also learning other cultural dances as well. And so, yeah, that's kind of what's in my care package, a little bit of everything, I think. And I'm really deeply appreciative of the insights that all of you have shared. And before we drop off of this session, I wanted to invite Ken to share some of the resources that people can go to seek mental health support. And then we'll wrap up this session.
Okay, thank you there, Bushra. So I believe these are going to be shared more widely. On the left here, we have some really great, just very simple tips, which you can visit at this website, voicesofyouth.org. These were developed partly by an organisation called the IASC reference group. And they're very simple, very easy to follow ideas about how we can manage stress and difficulties, particularly during COVID-19. On the right, we have the WHO Healthy at Home website, where there's again some helpful tips. And we've also just posted here under the WHO Health Alert chatbot. So this is something you can access on WhatsApp by sending hi to that message there. And then if you type breathe with an E at the end, you can then access the stress management guide through that. But the other thing I would just add is obviously, and here's more resources that we have. So again, the book on the right here, this is a storybook for younger children to help them cope with COVID-19 called My Hero Is You, and it's been translated into 100 and something languages. It's been made into films now, into audio plays, podcasts, all sorts of things, and it's very, very helpful for helping children cope with the difficulties and uncertainties around COVID-19. On the left here is another way of accessing some of the resources from WHO, which are helpful for mental health and well-being, and the guide, which I've mentioned. But obviously, one other thing I would just say, sorry, I think my headphones are running out of battery. One other thing I would just say is obviously if anybody is finding life very difficult, is feeling depressed, is having trouble sleeping, having trouble eating, maybe having thoughts that life isn't worth living anymore, it's obviously there are services out there and there are ways of seeking help and support. And obviously we've covered some of them here, but in whichever country you're in, you should be able to find some sort of form of support there. So I would also just mention that. Thank you.
Thank you so much for sharing those resources and also providing an avenue where people can seek out additional resources that are specific to their contexts. I wish we would have had more time to be able to go into further conversations about these important topics. I think it just illustrates the need that we have to be engaging in these types of spaces and sharing the challenges that we're facing, the best practices that we've learned or the lessons that we've learned with each other, and really fostering a greater sense of community. So with that, I wanted to really encourage people to, again, center empathy in the work that they do, agency, support one another, but also take care and prioritize their own well-being and health during this time. And even beyond COVID-19, I think as the world is looking to imagine what the world will be like post-pandemic, these are some really important questions to be asking about how we can systematically provide mental health support. So it's not just a small percentage of the funding that we give to our national health institutions or even through humanitarian development aid, et cetera. And then also look at addressing these systems that contribute to mental health challenges. So systems of oppression, really prioritizing decolonization, reconciliation, indigenizing of spaces, leveraging traditional knowledges and cultures to support well-being and mental health in a really engaged and meaningful way. And so with that, I'd like to thank all of our speakers. I've really enjoyed being able to engage in this conversation with you, and it's been a deeply humbling experience as well, just to learn about the amazing things that are happening, and also recognize that there's also other initiatives that I would like to encourage people to seek out and to really amplify and support. I know that that's been a struggle for a lot of grassroots and community organizations, that funding is sometimes scarce or disappearing for them. So for those of us who do have those funds and resources available, to make them more accessible to these communities, I think is really vital. So again, thank you everyone for joining us. And I hope to see you join us for a future EPI-WIN webinars as well, and future WHO webinars. Thank you and have a great night or day wherever you're based around the world.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Be safe, everyone.